I'm Dan Yaris. I'm the Executive Director of the Chamber. I'm also a member of the Bryan Development Foundation Board of Directors, and we are glad you're here. We're excited about hearing opportunities, challenges, the pluses of our community, the downsizes of our community, what we can do to make our community better, and we are so excited that you took the time to come out and be a part of this. I am going to turn it over to the Heritage Ohio people right away, let them go from here, because I don't know what I'm doing. They know how to do this. They've done it many times, but we're going to turn it over to Frances Jo Hamilton. She likes to go by Joe, I think.
Joe is fine. Of course, my mother would be real happy if you said the whole long drawn-out thing, of course. So welcome. Thank you so much for giving your evening time. I really always appreciate when folks are willing to come out and spend their spare time to participate in their community. So it's great to see so many people out tonight. What we would like to do, we're going to run through a quick presentation so that you have some idea about Heritage Ohio, about the Ohio Main Street program, and what it is that we do, what the Main Street program looks like. So please, if you have any questions, raise your hand, speak up. I really prefer for this to be conversational if possible. So you'll get a chance to hear from myself and the rest of our team, so I'll introduce them as they're coming up. But we'll get started right away. So Heritage Ohio, our mission is to save the places that matter, build community, and live better. And I'm never in a community that this doesn't ring true for them too. So we really feel like our mission fits the mission of most every community that we go into in order to revitalize and help boost up the downtown. We focus in 3 separate areas. So the first is revitalization. We offer technical assistance. We oversee the state's Ohio Main Street program, which is under the National Trust for Historic Preservation and the National Main Street Center. You'll hear a little bit more about that later. And we operate on a 4-point approach, which we'll go into as well. We also focus in preservation. So at the core of who we are a historic preservation organization. So even our Main Street programs and our downtown revitalization efforts are all historic preservation based. We focus in the Top Opportunities program, the Ohio Historic Theaters Initiative, our preservation easement program, and then we also do one-on-one advice and consultation when it comes to preservation projects in communities across the state. We also focus in advocacy. So we're the ones at the State House advocating on behalf of things like the historic tax credits, which I'm sure you all heard a lot about in the last year or so. So it's not just at the local level that these things are super important. So we're always keeping our finger on the pulse when it comes to federal and state advocacy as well. So the National Main Street Center is a nationwide movement for the Main Street programs across the United States. So this is not just a statewide program, it's not just a local program, but it's part of a much bigger movement and part of Main Street America. So you can go to those websites, you can see revitalization statistics from the states across the United States, as well as cumulative on how these programs are working in communities across the United States. The Main Street approach is very intertwined. So we talk about the 4-point approach a lot. We focus on design, organization, promotion, and economic vitality. But all of those things play together to put into place that strategic motion that really revitalizes your downtown. This is a list of our Ohio Main Street programs. So we have full Ohio Main Street programs. We're at 23 programs right now. And then our downtown affiliate list, which actually I don't think this has been updated, maybe for a month or so. That list is kind of ever evolving. So we're constantly talking to and bringing in new programs. At this point, you are all a downtown affiliate level program. So we operate on 8 principles. The Main Street program is a comprehensive approach. That means that there's not one silver bullet. There's not just one thing that actually will revitalize your downtown. It's a culmination of everything coming together in that perfect balance. So it's great to put in flower planters, it's great to put in a new downtown clock, it's great to, have buildings restored and revitalized, but you have to have everything come together. There's not just one thing that's going to make this work. It relies on quality. Absolutely everything you do has to be of the utmost quality. So if you're doing 60 flower baskets and 30 of them are dead, probably should just do 30, right? So we want to make sure that everything that we're doing, we have the capacity to do at that superior level. It's meaningful public and private partnerships. So all of our communities are also in agreement with their local city or municipality to support the local Main Street program. It is something that requires that public and private partnership, and it goes a long way on both sides. So one of my favorite events, I'll tell you a little bit about myself as I go along. I grew up in Delaware, Ohio. And in 1999, when our Main Street program started up, then a couple of volunteers that had started working on our program and were sitting in seats just like you all are right now, came to me and asked me if I would do some walking tours in our downtown. So at that time, I was taking whatever speaking classes I could at the local community college to try to get over this deathly fear of public speaking. Turns out you don't get over that. You just wear dark colored clothes so nobody knows you're sweating through them. So it works. But I said, absolutely, that's like trial by fire, right? Of course, I'll do 2 walking tours in my community twice a week. So I started volunteering for the Main Street program in my community. And then after a while, because I was a volunteer in perpetuity, a leader in perpetuity, I couldn't get out of it, so they finally hired me as their executive director. So I did the executive director position for almost 10 years, and then just 2 years ago took the position at Heritage Ohio. So I've seen this program from every facet, from it being important enough for me to give my personal time as a volunteer to it actually becoming something that I get to do for a living. How great is that? But this is one of my favorite projects in my community, was just putting in our downtown Christmas tree, because it meant that all these private and public entities came together on one day. The city cut the tree down. It was donated by a private resident. We had a private crane company, Oberfields, that had a crane. They came, they craned the tree in place. They craned the tree stand, which was fashioned by a metalworks company in our community. The land there is actually private property where we lost a building, and the new owner of that particular corner called me and said, I understand that you put the Christmas tree on this lot every year, so how can I make that easier for you? What a great thing to say. So I have this beautiful tree hole in my downtown now, which is fantastic. Has electricity in there, all kinds of fun things. So, it comes down to the community all pulling together to make such a simple thing happen, right? But it's a really beautiful moment when it all works together that way. But the city is also getting a huge return on investment for this program. So we have private entity taking care of things like scrubbing sidewalks. So every March, my volunteers come out at 6 o'clock in the evening, and they don't stop until 6 o'clock in the morning. And we work for 12 hours scrubbing sidewalks with 2.5-inch fire hoses, and it's great fun. First of all, if you have not wielded a 2.5-inch fire hose before, you want to do that. You might not be able to do it for very long, but it's great fun. It endears people to their community, and these are the people that will never, ever, ever walk over another piece of trash, right? You spend 12 hours cleaning your downtown, you're not going to walk over trash. But these are the kinds of things that the city would normally have to figure out or do, right? So these are my volunteers scrubbing the sidewalks. It involves changing attitudes. Attitude is a little thing that makes a big difference, right? I feel like communities are always way harder on themselves than anybody else. I cannot tell you how many times, even now in Delaware, Ohio, I hear people say, that's pretty good for Delaware. Shame on us. Shame on us for being so hard on ourselves and not believing in ourselves, even at the point of a success, right? But we're super hard on ourselves. We have to change our attitudes, which means we've got to pull everybody in. This is my mayor. I'm looking at you, Mayor. I mean, I think you could probably do the feather boa better than Wendell did. I think you could do it. So, bringing people in, changing their attitudes, having fun together, making sure that we're all talking the same talk and being super positive about our downtown. It focuses on existing assets. One of the things I love about the Main Street program is it's not a cookie cutter program. It's not something that turns every community into this little box of ticky-tack, right? That's just the same everywhere you go. We want to find out who you are. The last thing I want to hear when I go to a community is for them to say, we want to be just like, plug in whatever they think their successful closest community is. We don't want you to be anybody else. We want you to be Bryan. We want Bryan to be great, and we got to figure out what your existing assets are that make you who you are, that show your personality. It's a self-help program. It's ground level, grassroots program. One of the last things I want to do is sit around and talk about whose responsibility it is, right? I'd rather just do something. This is the kind of program that allows your community to just do something. If a neighborhood needs cleaned up, if the downtown needs cleaned up, then we just get together and we do it, rather than having a meeting after a meeting after a meeting to talk about whose responsibility is and let's write some code and right? There are so many things that we could just do. This is one of my favorite little photos. You see everybody holding brooms there. They got a nice donation of brooms for their downtown merchants. The best part is the little card that's on the bottom of the brooms is actually instructions on how to use it. I love that. I think it's terrific. So, but there's nothing more endearing than sitting on you guys have great benches downtown. I think a lot of places do terrible jobs on picking downtown benches that are not comfortable. Your downtown benches are super comfortable. So, but it's great to sit on a downtown bench and then see your merchants outside sweeping those sidewalks in the morning. How many of them park behind their building, come in the back door, and they never ever come out the front door? They just unlock it and then stand behind their POS for the rest of the day, right? Well, we got to come out front, see if there's a pile of leaves, look at the window, see if there's dead flies laying there, clean it if you need to, right? Sweep the sidewalk. But it's little things like this that can make a big difference in doing that. The Main Street program is incremental in nature. Even our programs that have been doing this for 30 years are still doing it. You never get to check revitalization off your list. It just changes, constantly changes. So even when all of your vacancies are full, even when you have all the businesses you could ever dream that you ever wanted, even when people are waiting for 40 minutes for a restaurant in your downtown on a Tuesday, you still have work to do. So it's definitely incremental in nature. And it's implementation oriented. We want everybody just doing something. So we're going to help you get some real quick, easy wins, things that you can point to and say, we did that. I call them press releasable items, right? Take a photo, send it to the press, because we actually accomplished something. So we'll talk a little bit about the Main Street structure. It's a typical nonprofit structure. Usually you have a board of directors. Under that, you'll have 4 separate committees or task forces that will operate in all 4 points, and then hopefully eventually, a paid staff person. It is super important to realize when you come to that point where you actually need a full-time person overseeing this particular program. And all the committees really bleed into each other. So we just want to see the expertise doing what needs to be done and where it needs to be done. So sometimes projects might jump from one committee to the next because that's where the expertise lies. But we just want to see projects happening. The organization committee is really functions in the organizational end of things, policies and procedures, volunteer management, making sure that the organization has the funds to actually function, budgeting. They're doing all the really fun stuff, right? Organization. Design is going to focus in historic preservation, mainly taking a look at our downtown. There's always that place that you love to go to, and you could spend hours there, and you really enjoy being there, and you almost hate to go home. Well, that's what we want the downtown to be, but we have to focus on those aesthetic things that make us feel super comfortable in a space and a place that we want to be for a long time. comfortable benches, nice shade trees, little things like that go a long way. Promotion. We talked a little bit at lunch today about promotional activities. When you are training the humans to come back to the downtown, you've got to do that on a routine basis. So we want to fill in. You can't just put in a splash pad. You can't just put in a beautiful fountain. You've got to program those activities. We have to train the people to come back to the downtown, and a once-a-year event isn't going to cut it. We have to do regular events. That's why things like First Fridays and farmers markets work really well to retrain our brains that downtown is where we want to be. And then economic vitality. We want to focus on the businesses that are here now. Business retention first, always, then expansion, and then recruitment into our downtowns, and being super intentional about who we want to be here. So the board of directors typically handles leadership planning, funding, and personnel. We like to be really intentional about who is around this table. We want a full reflection of the community. So a lot of times it gets a little misconstrued that maybe this is a merchants organization and that the business owners or the building owners are the ones that are totally responsible for the downtown. It's not just those folks that are responsible. The full community is responsible, and it belongs to everyone. So we want to see a full reflection of the community around the table, and then we want to see the talent that we need around the table as well. So we're super intentional about who we bring on into that leadership. The board of directors is going to focus on the planning, setting those strategic goals each year, and then handing the goals and the mission to the committees to actually do the fun work of coming up with the programs, projects, events, and activities that will carry out those goals and transformation strategies. Everybody always asks me about funding. And I always speak from the ideal. I know it doesn't always work out the way that we intended to, but ideally we like to see these programs funded a third in public funding, which is usually your city or municipality contribution, a third from stakeholder support or partnerships, and then a third from earned income. So how can we add a little ticketed event here and there that will help with cash flow to the organization? So I always like to point out our reinvestment statistics. The one that I always point out the most is the reinvestment ratio. So the return on investment to a typical Main Street program in the state of Ohio is $33 for every $1 that goes into that program. So operations committee, I'll go through that committee, and then I'm going to hand off to not even sure who's next, but I'll hand off to somebody after we're done with operations committee. So volunteer recruitment and development. Everybody says we don't have enough people. We never have enough people. And really, it's about how we're retaining those people. So when we are bringing in volunteers, it's super easy to do if we just think about it like recess, right? We don't get recess anymore, so how do we make friends? You can either go to church or you can go to a bar, right? Those are kind of your two options, okay? But you can volunteer. You can do like-minded things with like-minded people in your community that you really love to do. And then when you're social while you're doing it, then you don't want to be left out the next time they're all together doing it. So when we bring in that social element into the volunteer structure, and then we're constantly building up leaders and giving them an exit plan, right? I was the design committee chairperson in perpetuity. That's not nice, folks. It's not the way you do it. People like to see exactly when is my leadership going to end, and new leaders like to see that there's room for them to grow in an organization and do something important. So we talk an awful lot about volunteer recruitment, motivation, training, and recognition. Say thank you, say it often. I still, to this day, send text messages to volunteers that did really great things for me. And they're always, even years later, super thrilled to hear me say thank you to them. It's never too late to say thank you. Communications and public relations, we want to make sure that we are giving a pointed experience to everyone when they are experiencing the Main Street program. That's why we're talking a little bit about it to you tonight, so that you all have an idea when somebody says to you, what did you all do on Tuesday night? Now you know exactly why you were here and what the program is about. But everything should come together under that same vein and look the same and be the same, so that everyone knows exactly what the Main Street program is doing. Partnership is about selling the mission. What are we doing and how are we doing it and why are we doing it? And how can we bring in new folks that will actually contribute to the organization? And then earned income. The biggest thing you can do is sponsorship. So eventually when events and activities and promotions and projects become big enough that companies start to recognize that putting their name on it is going to do something good for them, you know, that can be a huge income producer for you. And then ticketed events, doing fundraisers. I really promote smaller one-off fundraisers rather than the 6-month-long worth of planning and 35 people that it takes to make $5,000, right? And then the operations committee is going to manage those donations. So how are we going to handle the budget and going forward and looking, 5 years into the future, and how do those funds continue to come in and get utilized? So next, I'm going to pass to Joyce Barrett, who's our executive director for Economic Vitality.
Good afternoon. Good evening. Actually, I'm fast forwarding to Wednesday. Joe is on Tuesday still. Economic vitality is one of the 4 points. We want you to know the 4-point approach. Economic vitality, it deals with the economics of the downtown. Promotions deals with the social aspect. Design deals with the physical aspect. And we could do this for an hour, we could do this for a day, and hopefully I'm going to do it in less than 10 minutes, just to give you an introduction of the type of projects we're talking about. We want you to know your market. This is something you can work with Maumee Regional Economic Development, runs market analysis and ESRI analysis for you. You can also do that on your own. We talked about retaining and expanding businesses before recruiting outside businesses and then filling those vacancies. Wisconsin developed a market analysis tool for Main Street across the country. They use this do-it-yourself market analysis, and it's a really fun tool to go through, learn a little bit more. You all learned, I think, before about buying local. You want to keep more dollars in your community, so how can you promote that Buy Bryan campaign just over and over? I want to keep circulating those dollars. This is a sample from Lakewood, Ohio. They did a study with Team NEO, which is the Northeast Ohio Regional Economic Development, where they took family of 5, empty nester, a single person, a young couple, and they tracked their spending for 1 week to understand samples, what are the impacts that a family, just an individual, really can make when they make their choices, local purchasing instead. And it becomes really profound. If we all shopped local, how would that change our economy? You've already done this before. This is a business analysis, and we kind of working on that again. Understanding what do you have. Bryan has many more businesses in this downtown than you realize. 4 or 5 beauty shops, 0 barber shops, and things like that. Understanding what you actually have so you can look at the categories that you might be able to recruit into. So taking a business inventory, which kind of have this list, but really working that inventory and understanding what your needs are. A great way to expound upon this is the Economic Vitality Committee does business visits. They actually go and talk to the business people about what do you see, what would complement your business, what are your plans, are you planning on expanding? So in our world, if you went to one of the restaurants, they know restaurants. If you said, I want an Italian restaurant, we really think that would go well. Well, somebody who already runs a restaurant can expand and do a second model or something like that. It's knowing your business people, knowing their goals so that maybe you can fulfill some of the niches that are empty. Retail Minded Magazine is something that we'll be sharing with you, trying to give retailers just more information, more ideas, trying to keep current, trying to keep them adapting to an ever-changing environment. We do have secret shopper samples from different places, but we found that merchants really don't like secret shoppers so much. But what we borrowed from Maryland is a self-evaluation form that you can go in and you can look at your own business. You can stand out, like Joe said, stand in front of the store. Is it clean? Does it present itself well? Last week we were in a little community within 20 miles of Canton, and the jewelry store, which was a fine jewelry store, the outside was so ugly. I promise you, none of you would ever go in that store thinking, I want to buy something expensive. You know, you have to have the outside needs to match the inside, and we keep trying to build that quality up in service. You might have seen this before. We always talk about those vacancies as full of opportunity. They're not just empty, they are full of opportunity. And you use this square in the middle to put the details about what's available in that storefront. It's 2,500 square feet. It has a kitchen. It has a loading dock. You know, just a for rent sign and a telephone number doesn't tell anybody any information. You try to sell that building to the passerby walking down the street. This is a gimmick that Marietta did during their first Fridays. They had a whiteboard and they said to their community, what do you want to see in this store? Some of the ideas are outlandish, but some of them aren't outlandish. You know, a bakery, a record store, a this or that. Get ideas from the community about what they want on their feet right there. It's fun interaction. Again, Ohio's small business development centers have a lot of opportunity to help your merchants be stronger at what they do. There's never a time that we should stop learning, and it's easy to get lazy, but we've seen time and again businesses that adapt to the changing environment are more likely to be successful and stay in business than those people who do not change their ways. This is a sample that I like showing off a lot. It's from Painesville, their Economic Vitality Committee. The volunteers go in and they help the new store owner get ready. They set up merchandise, they paint, they clean carpets. Then they go and they post on Facebook that where they were, who they were helping, and then they put on the first grand opening. They bring in the drinks and the hors d'oeuvres. And if you were a business person, this committee is doing all that work for you. Do you think you want to locate in that community when somebody's providing that much support? Of course you are. And it's fun. It's fun to get to know those new businesses that are coming in. This is a slide we like sharing. When you walk down the street and you see those empty buildings, every town has some vacancies, you think, oh, the poor building owner, he's not getting any money. But you never think about what the cost is to all of you in the community. It's just like buying local. When that building is left empty, that means no one's buying copies, no one's buying promotions, no one's buying services from the attorneys and the CPAs. So this is an example of just a small little business being vacant is worth about $217,000 of lost economic activity within the community. You multiply that times 10 vacancies, and then you're looking at $2 million in lost economic activity that could be benefiting all of you, not to mention the lost income, sales, and property tax that would be going to your city and county. You already have a lot of information on building inventories. That really goes back to if I were to walk in and I said, Joyce wants to open a bridal shop. Show me. Where? Where's the store I would go to? You have to understand what your inventory has so that you can play match game and get people in the right building. And we're always saying good businesses do not go into crummy buildings. So back over on design, when Pearl does that, we're going to talk about how can you get your buildings in good shape so that they could be leased by good businesses. This is an example I know I'll be sharing with you. Tiffin, for one, Tiffin, Portsmouth, several of our communities are doing grants to businesses to improve their buildings, and they're leveraging a lot of money. I think Tiffin's like over $2 million leveraged in the past 2 years, and really a small grant share program, because when you give just a little bit of carrot, people tend to take advantage of that. The last thing, I think this is next to last slide, is about vacancies. Using your website, trying to get more information out there into the cyber world as well as the physical world about the spaces you have available. So the Main Street program works with your area realtors to promote the building as much as possible through events as well as electronic listings. Upper floor living is one of the biggest mega trends in downtown in the last 20 years. I know you already have some great living spaces upstairs and you want to expand that. And at lunch we were talking about upper floor tours that are hugely popular as people want to see inside and they want to see how can you develop that space so more people can live downtown. And we do look at all markets, high-end markets, medium and low rent markets. So the waitress at the restaurant might have a little apartment upstairs. You know, all of those, the varieties gives more texture and interest to the people living downtown. And I bet there are more people who live downtown right now than you actually realize. This is my very final slide. It's about using the programs the state offer. The Ohio Development Services Agency has CDBG, Community Development Block Grants, which are federal money from HUD, Housing and Urban Development. You've used those a few times, and I'd encourage you to keep applying for that because building owners across downtown can use that for building code improvements, and there's never an end to that need. So really going back and applying over and over and making sure you're getting access to some of those dollars. So that was just a very quick overview, and I'm going to turn it over to Devin, who will be talking about promotions.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Devin. I'll be talking about promotions with you tonight. Promotions, it fits into the 4 points of Main Street by promoting your image as your community, promoting your businesses, both to residents and to visitors alike, and developing a set of activities that happen in your community that draw people into your downtown. So, key points of an effective promotions campaign in your community. What do you have to offer? What is Bryan all about? What are you offering to your residents? What are you offering to anyone who's visiting your community? Then, who are you talking to? Are they just residents? Who would come to Bryan? Why would they come to Bryan? And finally, what are you going to tell them about Bryan when you identify them? So, a lot of communities, they don't know exactly where to start with this. There's great examples in Bryan to start with. You have wonderful historic character in your downtown. You have a lot of existing buildings. You don't have many what we refer to as missing teeth in your downtown, missing buildings that have been torn down and nothing has replaced them. You have a wonderful, beautiful courthouse in your downtown, a lot of great architecture to go around. You also have great heritage in Bryan. Northwest Ohioans, a lot of us have German heritage. Some of us have Irish heritage. You have a great history with Ohio art and Spangler candies in your community, and any other industries that the community is proud of. Where do people gather? I know in Bryan you're very proud of your parks. You have some wonderful parks strewn across the city. You have a great city square for people to meet in. And you also have government facilities. As I just said a moment ago, great courthouse. The government is proactive in your community. You know what they're doing. And finally, services that you have in your community. Beyond that, where you have an Amtrak station in your community, you have highways nearby that are attracting visitors and commuters through your community as well. So when you're talking about these ideas, you really want to focus on three main areas. So first, you want to talk about the image that you want to develop for Bryan. What do you want to tell people about Bryan? What are you proud of? If the President of the United States popped in tomorrow, surprisingly, where would you take him in Bryan? It's a lot more complex than saying, oh, you know, I take my relatives here or there. But it's a very important person. What would you do with them in your community? Also, promoting your businesses. Bryan has great businesses. You have a wonderful movie theater. You have wonderful salons. And you have many more new businesses coming in the future to your community. What are you going to tell people about them? What are you really proud of in your community and where you would want to take these people to? And finally, special events. You have the Jubilee, you have the Christmas on the Square, Barn and Fall Fest, and your Spring Fling. These are really important events to Bryan, both economically, but also great social aspects as well, bringing the community together and visitors to the community. So, when you're talking about your strategic plan for your downtown, first you need to identify your audience. And this one is just classic marketing strategy. And a lot of people really don't think of it too deep. You know, you think of, residents, visitors. But you also have employees that work in your downtown that may not be from Bryan, but they visit here 5 days a week. You have lots of truck traffic coming through this. You have many state routes. Those people are possibly stopping in Bryan. Lots of people are traveling to other destinations. This is a wonderful place to stop on the way to those destinations. So really just digging really deep into those market segments and just analyzing what attracts those people to what, and what does Bryan have to offer them. Next up is, just anything and everything in your community, taking a look at what do you have to offer. Bryan has a great art history. What kind of art activities can you be doing in your community, both for the residents to enrich their lives, and as well as visitors to entertain them? Other aspects, things like wellness, health. You have a very large, beautiful bike trail just north of the community. You have Nettle Lake less than half an hour away. Lots of recreational opportunities in the community. So, as I just mentioned, arts. In Bryan's long history with the Ohio Arts, you could do tons of fun activities in your community involving really simplistic arts. And these are by far some of the most popular events that people host in their downtowns. Both art installations, art activities that are temporary. They don't have to be permanent. They don't have to be expensive for your community to undertake. And it's an enriching activity for all people in Bryan. And secondly, how are you incorporating this design, your brand, and this art into the beautification of your community? Lots of communities have gone to lengths of things like decorating manhole covers. I mean, it's not something a lot of people think about, but it can be a beautiful item if you think about it. So, Bryan should develop a unified marketing strategy for itself. And part of the major implementation of that is going to be developing a brand image. So it's an image that organizations across the city are taking aspects of and applying it. So Bryan is already known as the Fountain City. How can you apply that into an image and use it as a promotional item so everyone knows this thing came from Bryan, Ohio? So when people are developing images, it also is the general image of the downtown, and Pearl will be talking more about this in the design section, but when you have items like this in your downtown, not saying it does, but some downtowns do, it turns people off. They don't want to come back to your community when it's not well kept. Rather, when things are clean, artistic, beautiful, pleasing to the eye, people will want to return to your community. Residents will be happier. It shows the government is proactive, listening to its citizens. Employees will be happier in their community because more things are being done. So, another example is signage. So, which is more pleasing to you? Lots of no's in your community? No of this, no that, or telling people what they can do in your community. So when you're doing this example of building an image, you have to have multiple strategies to implement this to let people know. Particularly when you're starting fresh, it's kind of complex. It takes effort and time to get it going. So you have to look at several avenues of doing this. Traditionally, you have your newspapers, you have print materials on tourist brochures, but also the internet is a great tool. It's the free one. Mostly it doesn't cost money for a lot of things. People want to use it more and more anyways. Other examples that for businesses, your Yelp and your Google reviews, very important, something a lot of businesses overlook, but it's highly important. Visitors are always looking at Yelp to see where they want to eat, see how good this event is, see how good this activity is. If it's got a lot of bad reviews or a lot of bad photos because you haven't taken control of your page, horrible marketing for yourself. You're doing yourself more damage than you could possibly doing anything else for your community. So, when you're doing marketing like this, there's different examples of ways to work together to separate the cost. So you have cooperative promotional marketing, so something like a restaurant week, very popular idea across cities or all around the United States. Also cross-promotional items, so I'll give you an example. So if you attend the Bryan Theater to see a movie, new ice cream store opening 2 stores down, you get a discount since you went to see a movie. They split the cost of that. And finally, niche promotions. This could be anything and everything. So people that are on the bike trail coming in, they get a discount in the store. Something simple as that. Part of your branding identity should be focusing on shopping local, authentic experiences, unique experiences, and the one missing from this, I think, it's more important than any of them, quality experiences. Something that people can get the most out of. So shop Bryan, Ohio. What is Bryan the most proud of? Bryan should always build quality, high good products that people are very proud of and they'll keep coming back. So as I just mentioned, restaurant weeks, easy promotion, something that most communities do nowadays, and it can be really simple. Set menu, That's special for 1 week only. Get as many restaurants to participate as possible, and more will want to participate in the future. So, another big aspect of the promotions committee is special events. Why should you have a special event? Your special events should always be reinforcing, convincing, and training people to come into the downtown, to go to those shops on a regular basis, to participate in your downtown on a regular basis, and have fun while they're doing it. I couldn't stress this enough that a lot of events that happen in communities do not tie into the local businesses. They just happen on the square. They don't take advantage of the businesses that are there. They don't ask them to participate, and it does damage more than it does good. People just get annoyed. Well, my business doesn't have parking because you got the 3-day Jubilee in the downtown. A lot of complaints, things like that. And you just want to work more and more to get those involved and convince people that downtown Bryan is an awesome place to go to and spend their money there. So, when you're holding special events, other than focusing on training people to come to downtown, great examples are a social activity. Art is an example of that. Heritage, what are you proud of in Bryan? Ohio Art Festival, anything like that that kind of harkens back to great experiences Bryan's had in its history. And finally, holidays. You already got the Christmas event happening. It's a wonderful event. What other ways can you incorporate other holidays to convince people to come into your downtown and participate in special ways? So when you're planning festivals, there are 5 things you should talk about. Food, people like to eat, that's pretty simple. People like music, other art aspects to it. Activities for people to do. Something that involves something for all ages. This is kind of one that people kind of just get very myopic on, where they just kind of focus on one thing. There should be things for elderly people to do. There should be things for young people to do. There should be things for families to do at your events. And finally, there should be some aspect of most of these festivals that should be free. It's not saying it should all be free. There can be things that are paid, but there should be some free aspects to get people involved in this event. So when you're planning your events, lots of things to think of. Why are you having the event? When are you having the event? Things it conflicts with. How much is it going to cost? Really basic budgeting items. And when you're managing your special events, you really just want to come up with some really great ways to attract people to it. You know, what is the goal of this event? Why should people come to it? And how are you going to get them to come and make it an exciting event for them? And finally, you should work on developing a full calendar through the year to make sure it's balanced. You don't want events just happening here and there that just kind of sporadically get people into your downtown. You want small events, you want large events, you want medium events to happening throughout the year, so people are coming to your downtown continuously. And it doesn't always have to cost money. These things can be free entirely, both to the organizations. They can be something as simple as the farmers market happening in your downtown, so you have something balanced between the Jubilee and the farmers market happening during the year. So you're convincing people all year, training them to come into your downtown, getting those businesses participating with these events so that everyone feels like they're being connected to one another through your events. So that is my last slide. I will turn it over to Pearl to talk to you about design. Thank you.
I'm Pearl Jean May. I'm with Heritage Ohio, and I'm going to talk to you about design. So, design is about these things, and I'm not going to read them off because I'm going to cover each one. So, to start with, accessibility and ownership of public spaces. Your downtown belongs to the individual business owners and building owners, yes, but it also belongs to the entire community. And each of these facets is part of that ownership of the public space. So, to break a couple of those down, signage. You don't have to have boring signs, right? I see a lot of communities with just flat, boring signs, no blade signs, because, you put those up, they're going to fall down, they're going to cut somebody's head off. You don't want to do that, right? No, you want to have interesting, artistic, unique signage, because it's what gives character to your streets as you're walking down them. And pedestrian signage, right? We're not making billboards for cars going 50 miles an hour through the downtown. It needs to be to the scale of the people who are hopefully walking around that downtown. So also public improvements. When you're thinking about street furniture and the things that make up the environment of your downtown streetscapes, why be boring? You don't want the same trash can that every city orders out of the catalog the black metal one that just everybody knows. It's in every park in every town in the United States. Why not be interesting? If you have benches, why not make them unique and relevant to your community? You know, you can do bike stands that are very interesting and artistic. I noticed a severe shortage of bike stands, and by that I mean I didn't see a single bike stand. I saw a lot of parked bikes. I saw a lot of bikes. But thank you. Thank you. Congratulations, Mayor. That is wonderful. That's the first step in the right direction. Get more bike stands. One is a good start, though. And again, you guys have great benches, but all the benches were facing the street that I noticed. So what about conversational benches? What about benches facing each other so people can sit and chat and not have to, like, you know, just, hi, how are you doing? It's kind of awkward. Wayfinding. You guys have a lot of parking, right? A lot of public lots, but no one knows about it because there's no signage indicating that there's public parking anywhere. And that's very hard on visitors. You know, if you're driving in from out of town, and yes, there's a lot of street parking and stuff, but if there's things that you want to get to, how do I know where that really cool shop is that somebody told me about? Sure, I might Google it, or I might just want to get out, walk around, and figure it out. So having great signage and great wayfinding is very important. Streetscapes. Are you considering how people at all ages and all ability levels and all modes of transportation are using your streets? They're public right-of-way, right? So we should be building them for all facets of the public. Can a woman with a stroller get down the sidewalks, or are there lots of bumps and cracks along the way? Can someone ride a bike down the road safely without, you know, getting honked at and get off the road? You know, that's not what we want. So do you have bike lanes? There's plenty of spaces on those roads for infrastructure of that kind. So start thinking about how you can incorporate those things. Parking and traffic, is your signage too complicated? Unnecessary rules? You know, really thinking about all those rules and why they're in place, and do they need to be, you know, relooked at again? And again, about the parking, you may have a lot of parking, but if people don't know where it is, they often complain about it. And then thinking again about the speeds at which people move through your downtown. That graphic on the bottom corner there just demonstrates essentially the kill rate at different speeds. So if you're moving at one speed, you're a lot more likely to suffer a fatality if you encounter a pedestrian versus if you're moving at another speed. So considering the traffic difference of moving 40 miles an hour, that's a lot of dead people, versus moving 20 miles an hour, everybody survived just about. So, and again, Devin talked about public art, but it's really about not just having public art for the sake of having art, but having art that speaks to your community, that engages your community. The example in the upper corner there with the pillars, those tiles were designed by, what was it Sandra said when we were there? Preschoolers. Preschoolers designed those tiles. You don't care, you can barely see them, but it tied them to this community for the rest of their lives, because they can always go back and be like, I made that when I was like a kid. It's awesome. And it stands there forever. I mean, how great is that? And, you know, if you have a graffiti issue, get some graffiti artists and have them just paint over that with awesome graffiti that's so pretty. It's like, oh, well, we can't mess that up now. And this mice on Main thing, those little girls that are just way too ecstatic, those are little brass mice. And what community was it? It's in North Carolina, I think. There is this little community, and they have this whole thing about this mice on Main stuff now. But they just put these little brass mice all over the downtown. There's like a children's book about it now, and the kids just go around and find them. And it's like this whole challenge thing. It's the cutest thing, but it's just the tiny little brass mice. How hard is that? And interactive art, like that's just an old piano. It's not in tune. Who cares? The fun thing is that you can engage with it. ADA compliance. And just accessibility in general. Building 8 to 80 cities. And what that means is that a person from 8 years old to 80 years old can use your downtown and still have a good time and be able to get around. So you want to avoid trees making all the sidewalks raise up and be unusable, and make sure that, you know, everybody can get around. So the next thing that design is about, historic preservation and compatible in development. So again, maintenance. Water is the #1 enemy of all buildings, so it would be really great that you educate your building owners that maybe downspouts should be fully connected and not just go down to the sidewalk, because that is not great for that building. It deterred maintenance, just reduces property values, and again, eventually that building with enough deterred maintenance will fall down. We saw that in, again, I can't remember the community. Louisville. We were in Louisville, Ohio, and they were like, well, it just fell down. Well, that's what happens when you leave it sitting there for long enough. So you need to, get away from that. So one great way to prevent deferred maintenance for such a long time is minimum maintenance codes. And if this building had minimum maintenance codes, it might not have had a wall fall off of it into the next door neighbor's building. So it's kind of one of those things, when do your property rights end and the property rights of the person next to you begin, right? It's just something to consider. And advocacy, it's a lovely little comic. So if you can't read it, it says, not that one, we'll have the Historical Society after us. So in general, it's important that if you have places that are important to you, again, save the places that matter. Just make sure that you talk about them and make sure that the community knows how important and significant they are. So celebrate your unique assets. A architectural scavenger hunt is a great way to get people to look at things that they don't always see. Those beautiful details on all the buildings in your downtown, some people just walk by them, never even look at them, don't even notice. Well, make them look at them, offer them a prize if they get all of them right, Compatible infill and additions. Look at these two infill projects. So one, you can tell what the infill is, I hope. And the second one, the infill is the part that's the more boxy section, right? So it's not completely obvious, but it's there. And, just kind of, how does that make you feel? Have a little therapy moment. What does that do to you psychologically? You want to go with the one that makes you happy, not the one that makes you question why it's there in the first place. Design review. When at all possible, it's a great idea to have control over what your community is going to look like. It's not just to punish people, right? It's to say, hey, corporate CVS, we know that you want to build the CVS that you build in every darn town, but we have these great historic buildings, and we know, because we've been shown, that you would go in one of them. So how about doing that? Because that's ugly, and we don't want to be left with it when you leave us forever. But only when it matters, right? We don't want to dictate paint colors and say, nah, it's got to be one of these 4 colors, or don't even bother, because it doesn't matter. Sustainability of the community. So when society, environment, and economy come together, you get the best of sustainable community and historic preservation. You preserve your history, you preserve you recycle buildings, which is the best form of recycling, because that is a lot of waste in the landfill, and you can use historic tax credits to do that. So, the amazing Jane Jacobs once said, old ideas can sometimes use new buildings, new ideas must use old buildings. In general, what that means is that, yeah, it's great that you can have corporations that can come in, build new stores and do all that, but when have you ever known a brand new, just new off-the-shelf idea to build a brand new structure? Right? That's too much upfront cost, right? They're going to use an old recycled building to test new ideas. So empowering your building owners to do good things. You want sticks, but you also want carrots. It's great to have tools like facade grants and other assets that your building owners can take advantage, but it's also important to educate them on how to use those tools and maybe some of the better choices that they could make. So the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation are essentially just 10 common sense standards. The key points listed, essentially it's repair over replacement. If you don't have to replace it, most of the materials that have been used throughout history to build buildings are far superior than what we have today. You can replace it with wood, even though it's wood, but it's not going to be the same quality wood that we had back then. So thinking about those choices in every detail when you're talking about historic preservation. So you guys have National Register districts. That gives you a lot of pros. It increases the values of the building by allowing you to use certain incentives and grants that are otherwise not available to you. And there are no cons. You can tear all those buildings down today. I do not advise it, but you can because there aren't rules about that. That comes from local designation. So the tax credits for the rehabilitation of historic buildings, these are how you use them. It has to be an income producing property, so you can't do it if you're just using that whole building as storage. That's not a great idea. But if you turn it into apartments, that's income producing. So 20% federal credit and 25% state credit, that's a lot of money for a project. You're talking about 45% of the cost of a project right there. So finally, finally, we want to be forming those partnerships with other organizations and groups that will help you achieve that. So, your city, the Ohio History Connection, State of Ohio, local arts councils, foundations, just be all working together towards those same goals of preserving your historic assets in your downtown. And with that, I'll turn it back to Joe.
Thanks, Pearl. Well done. I love her dead person count. I mean, that. Jeez. So, these are your downtown affiliate program benefits. I just want to make sure that everybody's always aware of the things that we do for you when you come into the Heritage Ohio family.
Mr. Muddle is our model. It's an typical Italianate building. This is what you've got tons of here in town. You got a title block. Somebody's very proud of their building. They put their name on it. This is heavily bracketed cornice, one of the most common features of identifying an Italianate building. Hooded windows, and again, that's to protect the window itself from rain, wind, and various damage. The sills. This is your signboard. You've got awnings. A lot of your buildings still have the roller awnings, though people weren't out using them in the hot sun today. But again, awnings, wind, rain, sun, snow, they only last like 8 years. They have to be updated and kept. Then you've got large display windows. When this building was built, that was what they showed off. Their products and services were those windows, and the bulkhead is a way to raise that for you. So this is what a typical building looks like. But over time, if you don't maintain it, and the reason we're talking about this is, I guess, a show of hands, how many of you people have a really high comfort level with design review in Bryan? High comfort level with design review in Bryan, right? Okay, not surprising. This is exactly what I expected. No one has a high comfort level, and hopefully I'm going to help you with that too. So this is combination building maintenance design review lesson. If you don't take care of your building, this is one of the first things to go. And I bet you've lost a lot of these. Kevin, I know you're a historian and seen a lot of pictures. These are usually metal. If they're not maintained, they're not painted, not caulked, it's gone. Awnings, they don't last, like I said, but like 8 years, they're gone. Do you see already how this building has started to become a little plainer? And, when somebody's investing in their building, you got to respect that they're putting money into it, but they're not always very smart about it. This is real common. Your town has tons of boarded up windows. There are a lot of towns where they go to the expense of masonry and they brick it up. Is this a good design choice? How many people think it's a good design choice? You're all qualified to be on the design review committee. That's what we're talking about. The prismatic glass, before they invented electricity, think about this. How many of those buildings downtown did not have air conditioning, did not have electricity? How did they get light into the back of the store? One of the tricks was this prismatic glass, which refracts the light back there. But a lot of people don't know how to maintain it. So, they've covered it up with plywood. I'm not fitting there. Good design choice, yes or no? See, you can all be on the design review committee. Okay, they dropped the ceiling so they could put an air conditioner in. Good design choice? No, you're all qualified. Another one that I really like, I did see this in Bryan. This is what we call the bad bar look. Somebody just spent $2,000 to do that. That's a building improvement. Design review committee members, good for business? Okay, it's not so hard. So if you don't take care of your cornice, people cover these up all the time. I just spent another $2,000 on that, and you're telling me I can't do it? The thing's going to fall off. And you know what you say? You say, fix it. You don't cover it up, you actually fix it. This is one of my favorites. A lot of people do not understand historic preservation. It really isn't that hard. You're all trainable. Remember we talked about the Italian architecture? Did I mention shake awnings as one of the elements of Italianate architecture? I just spent $3,000 to put that awning up. Design review board, good decision? Not rocket science. That building's looking pretty crummy. We got a few more to share with you. I know you had one like this and they took it off, I believe, several years ago. But when the malls were really popular in the 60s and 70s, we call that the cheese grater. And luckily, you can take them off almost as cheaply as you put it on. Again, design review committee members, is this a good design decision? Does this increase the value of the building? Does this adversely affect the building next door, the buildings on that block? That's why we have design review, because people will make financial decisions that are not good for their building, not good for the community. Just a few more. This one, sorry, I'm putting that down for a second. This is when somebody's got more money than sense. A lot of times we see financial advisors and they're like, I know historic architecture. I've been to Mount Vernon. I've been to Colonial Williamsburg. So they'll slap a colonial front on an Italianate building because they think that looks sophisticated and historic. It doesn't match. Design review committees. Does this have anything to do with Italianate architecture? Were you part of the colonies? Was Ohio a colonial? No. So you don't put colonial, facades on. Couple more. This poor little guy has been having a tough time. A lot of backlit cheap awnings have been going up. This is most payday lending. They love these, but I don't think he'll stick there anymore. But again, not a good look. You got to think about the integrity of the building and what signs are appropriate. So I know in the past, blade signs, which are what are perpendicular, and we showed some examples of really creative, interesting blade signs, a coffee pot if it's a coffee store and stuff like that. Those have always been around. So particularly on the East Coast in Boston and Baltimore, you'll see they're very popular. There's no reason they shouldn't be here in Ohio. When you go to the bigger cities, and even actually here in Bryan, neon was part of our life in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and that's okay. We want a little personality in your town, and that's always been true. So we're not trying to go back and be Disneyland a la 1920, where every sign is black and gold. My very last little improvement is back to signage. One of the reasons, people when they're desperate, they want more attention. So they think putting a billboard on their sign will bring them more customers. This is the sizing again, and I know in your ordinance you do have size requirements. I do think you have to have some flexibility, but the reason you don't have this size is this is a billboard size for traffic going 60 miles an hour. What you want is pedestrian traffic, and you want those signs to be appropriate so you don't get run over by a car, but at less than 20 miles an hour for people walking down, because people are the shoppers. And everything you do in your town, you're talking about making decisions for the people so that they see the signs, that they can interact and they can enjoy it. So typically, I want to get you back on your activity. Typically, we take us back to the Italianate building so that you can see it's not that hard to understand the integrity of historic buildings, and that's why you have design review, so that the decisions being made aren't controlled. It isn't arm twisting. It's trying to be helpful to protect the integrity and the future investment for everybody in the downtown.